Matt Drndak, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Matt, you bought a B2B e-commerce business, so a bit of a different business than one might think if you say e-commerce. And we're going to learn all about this business in this category today and your story of how you got here. Start us off, please, Matt, with a little of that. Give us some background on you, please.
Sure. So I grew up in Florida. My dad owned a solar contracting small business. I went to Florida State for a year, dropped out and bought a Homevestors franchise. They're the We Buy Ugly Houses
Sure.
Billboards, which you may have seen in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah. The caveman one?
Exactly. Yeah, they added a caveman. Yeah, they did.
I didn't realize that was a franchise, actually, that it was a big corporate concern. Interesting.
Yeah. I didn't either,
Cool.
but then when I found out it was a franchise, I left college to buy one. Did that from like 2002 to the Great Recession, great financial crisis. And thought I was a great real estate investor, realized I was not.
Because you'd done well during the run-up.
Exactly. Right.
How
As
well?
did a lot of people.
Right. Everybody was a genius.
Yeah, I mean, I started when I was 19 and, by the time I was 21, 22, I, on paper was a millionaire, I suppose, very much on paper though. And, thought that I'd keep everything in that asset class as leveraged as possible for forever, because real estate never goes down. And then, had a nice implosion at the bleeding edge of.
You had a real estate portfolio and you were a franchisee. So were in the We Buy Houses or what is it called? Home?
Yeah, We Buy Ugly Houses is kind of what everyone knows it as. It's Homevestors is the name of the company, but everyone knows it as We Buy Ugly Houses. But yeah, a lot of people used the franchise as a vehicle to build a portfolio of houses.
I see.
Yeah. So
you weren't building much. Your intention wasn't necessarily to build out this thriving franchisee. Instead, it was to use that as a vehicle to build your own real estate portfolio, primarily.
It was both. I mean, what did me under was I had a ton of hard money loans, high interest rate, short-term loans for my short-term inventory, and then the music stopped. Yeah.
And what happened when the music stopped?
I did my best to liquidate things as soon as possible. I wish I knew how to architect. I wish I had known how to architect some sort of short trade. I feel like I knew what was coming ahead of people, but had no idea how to properly react to or trade on that other than try to get out of things. It looked like a financial situation that if a personal bankruptcy could have made it better, I would have filed personal bankruptcy.
Wow. So down to zero or negative?
Negative, yes.
Yeah. And this is, I assume, 2009-ish?
I mean, that was actually, it got real bad for me even the third quarter of 2006, just because I was in Florida and it was the very, that scene from The Big Short where they're in Florida. I don't know. That's where I was. And, I
didn't realize that. So things started unraveling before 2008, which we all consider it all starting in 2008. But I guess things had started already unraveling in certain real estate markets a year more before 2008.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, and so it's 2006-ish, and you're how old?
24.
Okay.
24.
Okay. Well, not to take away from the trauma of that, but if you're going to find yourself broke, I guess best to do it when you're young.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It was a great college, and even more expensive than typical college education, but it was worth it for sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. So carry on. What comes next? Because I know you have a number of kind of small business experiences leading up to DHS, your now business. We're not going to have time for them all, but take us through the kind of quickly what happens next.
I bought I said, okay, well, I'll try to buy a simpler service franchise, bought a ServPro franchise, which is the disaster restoration deal in Austin, Texas. Wanted to buy several of them, quickly realized after buying the first one that wasn't going to be a possibility based on the first one that we bought. So kind of abandoned that before even a full year, probably. And then a guy I knew from Homevestors, a fellow franchisee from the We Buy Ugly Houses deal, an older than more experienced guy than me, was like, hey, we can just buy any business. It doesn't need to be, in a franchise network. And started looking on Biz Buy Sell, and this was 2008 at that point. And bought a business in Miami that sold parts for sprayers, chemical sprayers for like lawn pest control and small farms. Bought a business in the same industry that made the sprayers in 2009, and kind of consolidated those ultimately in Orlando a few years later. And so we had this company that we sold, we assembled the sprayers, we sold the parts and components for them as well. And we were able to ride kind of the early AdWords days. And grew that, owned it and operated it for about 9 years. My partner got sick, and I didn't know how to put together the money at that point to buy him out. I was a minority shareholder. So we sold it in 2017. We'd implemented EOS at Sprayer Depot and had a lot of great success with it. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try being an EOS implementer, which is kind of the consultants that implement the system in other businesses. I did that for a couple years. I loved the system. I don't think I'm a great consultant. So then that kind of brought me to 2020, early 2020-ish, when I started my search for the business that I now own.
Perfect. Let me ask you a couple follow-ups here, Matt. This gentleman, Joe, was your partner?
Mm-hmm.
When he says, we can just buy businesses, as I recall from our pre-call, that was an epiphany, an exciting epiphany for you, not unlike what I hear so many of my guests have, although they usually have it because they've read Buy Then Build, which wasn't published for another 8 or 9 years after you had your epiphany, thanks to Joe. So just talk me through a little bit of that. Like, I always love this moment, this light bulb moment that my guests have. So share your light bulb moment with us, please.
Yeah, it was why. I mean, I was like, because I do think franchises are great as well. But, being in one for a while, you do start to feel a little bit constrained sometimes. And not being a 0 to 1 tech entrepreneur type. It was just this whole world opened up. And I think you've had plenty of guests who have talked to it, just being that, you're searching in your hometown or just, places you'd like to live or certain keywords for types of businesses that are interesting. And we just went on like a road trip and just were driving all around the Southeast US and looking at a business a day because I don't know. I think there was less competition then, maybe, or something. But we'd call a broker. There'd be a listing. We'd look at the business the next day. It was this like 2 or 3 week.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Shopping, just shopping
exactly.
around.
We're getting LOIs confused in the car because we've got them all printed from the hotel. It was kind of a mess, but Yeah, I loved every minute. Even in that point too, I was looking at like, oh, I should have just bought existing franchises, even if I wanted to stay in the franchise. And I don't know why that didn't even occur to me, because those show up on Biz Buy Sell as well, even. And so just that whole idea of like putting debt or owner financing on an existing concern and just taking it to the next level, I think is the big unlock for me. Yeah.
Well, it took me 100 epissodes to realize the exciting opportunity that's that. And that's, of course, a niche within ETA is applying ETA to franchising, where you buy a franchisee that's existing. So it has all the benefits of ETA, existing business, don't have to start from scratch, and the benefits, but the pros and the cons of franchising. But just a little bit about the business that you did buy. We're not going to have time for the story, but Sprayer Parts Depot, I recall that in retrospect, you just said you didn't know how to buy it from Joe, who was ill. But you would have in retrospect, because why? That business, what you wouldn't have wanted to sell? Why?
Yeah, we had just kind of reached that point where, when we had bought the first business of the two that became Sprayer Depot, it was making a couple $100,000, the very bottom end of anything you'd want to buy, profitability and revenue and size wise. But yeah, we had gotten to the point where we were a legit company, approaching 2 million in discretionary earnings, and had a management layer in place and knew what we were doing. It was a nice niche, and yeah, I didn't have to be there every day. It was a good thing we had going. And yeah, it would have been stretching. It would have been beyond like the SBA limits, and I probably would have had to bring on even some outside money. But I would have rather given it a shot now, knowing what I know now about how easy well, not easy, but doable that is.
Doable. Yeah. Not as. But that exit, even though in retrospect you maybe wouldn't have done it, was material for you. The money you made on that exit.
Yeah. It was for me, it was a low 7-figure exit. So it was not retire and never work again money, but it was enough to be comfortable and ultimately, I guess, not need investors for this later purchase.
Then one question on the EOS, and then we're going to get into your search for your now business. You'd said, you got into EOS consulting and didn't love being a consultant, but still are committed to EOS. Give people 30 or 60 seconds on EOS and having seen it and implemented it yourself into a number of different businesses and kind of remaining a believer, or maybe even that solidified your belief even more. To just kind of pitch EOS to people for a minute, for those who don't know it very well.
Yeah, sure. It's just kind of all the business fundamentals you've ever read in any business book put into one kind of cohesive language, which I had never seen done. Typically it was me as the business owner bringing new ideas to employees and saying, this is how we're going to do this now. And that might have conflicted with a different way of running meetings previously, or, a different way to have a strategic vision. And this just kind of there's nothing, there aren't any concepts you haven't seen anywhere else. It's just in one nice cohesive system, and everyone can use the same language and, have the full plan on 2 pages, and you can show it to a banker. You can also show it to the guy who works in the warehouse, and everyone kind of gets like where we're going and how we're going to get there.
And you saw it have real impact on the businesses that implemented it?
Yeah, absolutely. The longest example I had was at Sprayer Depot, where we implemented it about halfway through and saw the iterations of our leadership team and several years of making plans and seeing if they came true and all of that. It absolutely worked with, I just had a handful of clients. One of my clients was Delivery Dudes, who was, you had Peter DeBaptiste on your show recently. Yeah. but yeah, he was one of my very few clients that I had. And yeah, I mean, it was great for them.
Okay, Matt. So you decide that you're not going to be an EOS consultant forever, and you turn your attention back to this thing that had worked well for you, buying an existing business. What does your search look like?
Yeah. I think it was Peter who early on, I was like, I think I'm not going to keep doing these implementations. I was trying to help them either find someone else or how to do it themselves. And I'm going to go and, find a business to buy. And Peter was even like, oh, that's a search fund. And, he kind of opened my eyes to, I think Search Funder, and probably soon after that, I found like Buy Then Build and the HBR guide and all that. And then I used that in combination with, I went back and found during our '08 search, there was one course on Biz Buy Sell called Diomo, which was by this guy, Richard Parker, who I think I've seen around Search Funder a little bit now, but it was he advertised heavily on Biz Buy Sell in '08, and it was a great just fundamentals of, I would say similar to the Buy Then Build architecture of like how to put a search together. So yeah, I just kind of went back and read all that. I said, it's been a decade since I've done this. Like I should, remind myself how it works. And yeah, just put together kind of my criteria and got on Biz Buy Sell and started I guess what you'd call now kind of a self-funded brokered search.
And looking locally, you're Florida based?
Yeah. So I was looking at first in, I live in Southern California, and but I've been back and forth to Florida a lot over the years, and so I started looking in Southern California specifically, but then pretty soon started looking in South Florida as well, just because I had a certain comfort level there with, I guess, the businesses and the people and how to transact there. And there just seemed to be more, like a lot of things in Florida, a more liquid market, maybe. I mean, this is at the beginning of COVID as well. So, things in general seem to be moving more there. Anyway, I was looking in both Southern California and South Florida.
Okay. And it was going to be Biz Buy Sell, pretty much that was going to be your deal flow, as opposed to something proprietary.
I would love for that have not to been the case. But I did just kind of your standard where like, okay, I'd see one listing that was interesting. I'd contact the broker and then just do whatever I could with the broker to get further up the funnel with the broker if I thought they were legitimate and had other listings that would be coming. And that ultimately did actually work out, because the things I got closest on and the one I ultimately bought, one way or another, weren't on Biz Buy Sell. They were from brokers, but for, whether it was an email they send out first or a phone call or what have you.
Well, I should come up with a name for this. The using Biz Buy Sell not to find businesses, but to find the good brokers strategy.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Because you're not. I don't know if you did that intentionally, but it's kind of the way it worked for you. It's the way it's worked for a number of my guests. And then I actually just had a recent guest who explicitly was like, I used Biz Buy Sell to find the good local brokers and then just establish relationships with those brokers. So intentionally or not, it seems to be a strategy of many.
Yeah, looking back, I probably should have. Yeah, now I would probably go and specifically look for brokers on Biz Buy Sell rather than maybe the one-off, based on the listing. But yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
Great. So eventually, after how long you find DHS?
It was about a year into my search, I would say. Yeah, early 2021. So I got close on a few things, but ultimately, I think I got DHS under contract, or under LOI rather, like the end of February of 21.
Okay. Wow. So if you had been doing a year, ish. This search really overlapped with COVID. Like when COVID started
Yeah.
almost exactly a year earlier.
Yeah. I was looking at my criteria before the call, and the first line was COVID resistant, which I don't even remember what that means anymore at this point. But yeah, that was part of it for sure.
Okay, great. So tell us about this business, DHS, that you found we're connected with.
Yeah, so it was kind of smaller than, I was looking in that 500 to 1.5 million discretionary earnings range as kind of your typical self-funded searcher SBA land. And this was right at the bottom end of that size-wise, earnings-wise. But it was kind of right in my wheelhouse with they sell parts for construction equipment, and mostly through e-commerce. Either the customers are checking out online, or at least finding us online and calling us, and we're packing and shipping them parts. And yeah, that just lined up well with my experience at the previous company. And even though it was smaller than I had hoped for, I just felt like I could grow it a little more quickly than something else that maybe I didn't have as much direct experience with, and kind of went into it with an investment budget in mind to kind of put some things in place that I thought could jumpstart the sales a bit.
So when you say an investment budget, you meant you were going to bring whatever you needed to acquire the business, and then you already were thinking about either using the earnings to reinvest, or infusing it with more of your own capital to really grow things, reinvest in the business. I guess that's not so dissimilar than most searchers. They imagine reinvesting, but it sounds like you were already budgeting things in your mind as you negotiated the transaction.
Yeah, exactly. I knew how much it would cost to implement a real ERP system in an inventory heavy business. I knew what it would cost to do some real marketing, as most people do. Just add inventory, a lot of blocking and tackling. It wasn't like anything super speculative, and it was easy enough to budget for.
When you say sell construction parts, give us an example. What's a construction part? Like, what's one of the most popular parts that sells, if such a standout?
Sure. I mean, most of the parts that we sell equipment for is a lot of like infrastructure construction. So a lot of road builders, bridge builders, excavation companies. And within those, it's a lot of soil compaction equipment, concrete and asphalt cutting, and any part that goes on any of those machines. It's a lot of vibration and a lot of shaky machines that have parts that wear, and we sell mostly for the lighter to medium duty equipment. So generally not the huge rollers that you'll see rolling a road, but a lot of the support equipment that might be closer to the size of a big lawn mower. And yeah, most of our parts fit in a FedEx 2-day pack. And we've got a lot of them.
And so a given part will be maybe something like a proprietary piece that has to fit a particular manufacturer's particular model, sort of thing.
Yeah, it might be a carburetor for an engine. It might be a gasket for an exciter assembly. It might be it can be a handle, an awkwardly shaped handle. So think of a lawnmower handle that we just need to figure out how to ship without getting damaged. And yeah, a lot of kits. We put together kits that are a combination of proprietary parts from the original equipment manufacturer combined with aftermarket sort of commoditized parts that we get from overseas, from Asia. And just over time, the previous owner, who was a mechanic, knew how to find the right mix of those. And yeah, I think that's kind of our unique offering in a lot of ways, is just that technical expertise that we're able to offer the customer, and they just kind of know that they can count on the parts that they're getting from us.
Well, maybe you've just answered the next question, which is, whenever I encounter an e-commerce business, it's like, why is this protected from Amazon? Why? I don't know if Amazon has a B2B construction section, but Amazon has everything. So if it doesn't, let's pretend that it could. Mm-hmm. Why did you feel that this was protected from Amazon selling carburetors out from under you?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of these things you can buy on Amazon. It's just a different experience. And there is the technical component. I think Amazon is getting a lot better in B2B when it comes to supply, as well as some other, like Home Depot, some other big players that are getting more into e-commerce are good on construction supplies, which are your consumables as a contractor. But when it comes to parts on the actual machine, you can't, if you get a supply, say you get a nail that's slightly the wrong size that you're using, I mean, it's not a big deal. But if you get a gasket that's slightly the wrong gasket, your machine is just not going to work, and your project is still halted. And so there's the combination of finding the right part that the customer needs and actually getting that to them as soon as possible. And the Amazon effect was certainly something we were always worried about at the sprayer business as well. I mean, going back, 14 years now, and we always kind of thought, well, Amazon will squash us at some point. But yeah, they've never quite gotten there with, I think, the niche B2B parts stuff yet. And not that they couldn't, but they haven't.
Well, and so it sounds like many of your sales are high touch sales. I mean, are you on the phone with people? Are you on the phone with your customer?
We are, yeah. The majority of them were not, and we've built enough on the front end to help customers self-service. Our typical product page is quite a bit more detailed and technical and boring than any t-shirt that you're going to buy online. But it's pretty explicit. Like, these are the models that this fits. If you're not sure, download this parts breakdown, and here's how to look at it and see, confirm that this is the right fitment for your machine that's 25 years old, and this machine has had 12 models since then, and let's make sure it's the right gasket, because the shape has changed ever so slightly over the years. And then, we say all over our website, if you're not sure, don't order it and just call us and we'll walk you through it, or chat with us, or email, however you like. And that's a combination of making people feel good that they are, in fact, buying the right part, maybe pointing out, like, hey, you might want these handful of other parts. If you're replacing that, you're probably going to want to replace these handful of other items as well. And then also just the sourcing of the parts. So sometimes people will have something in stock, but they'll need a couple other items on that same machine, and those we ship directly from the manufacturer. We have to special order them or whatever, but we can say, like, look, this is going to get to you in 4 days. This will get to you in 12. And yeah, that's a lot to communicate just on a website without the personal touch.
Yeah. And do you consider it a some of these definitions can be arbitrary, but do you see yourself as an e-commerce business or almost more of a distributor? But I guess not just typically a distributor, you kind of have regular distribution, whereas you're taking every order is different. Every order is, and you're serving the end customer as well. And that's not really, that's not distribution either. But it starts to feel like, you're the one middleman. I don't mean that in any negative way. You're the one middleman sometimes between a manufacturer and the end customer. And that sure sounds like a wholesaler or a distributor. So just indulge me putting arbitrary labels on the business. Where does this business slot in?
Yeah, I mean, it's all those. Like, I definitely think we're not a distributor in the classic sense of like we're just moving pallets of
right.
We get a truckload in and we move one pallet to each of our customers. It's much more we get a pallet in of a soup of parts, and then we put it into FedEx, tiny FedEx packages and get it to, you're right, the end. It's always the end user. I mean, almost always it's the end user. And I think of we're a parts dealer, we're a parts business. And I do think we're value add, it's not just about getting the part. There is a real service component to it as well. And so I'm sure on on my SBA loan, it was called, we're a parts distributor, but it's very much it's a B2B in that we're selling to businesses, but it's very B2C. We try to get the experience as much towards a B2C website experience as possible, recognizing that there are other components to the buying experience that everyone's aware of. And we just try to get as close to the easy breezy, no hassle, no effort experience that you would have buying paper towels on Amazon, recognizing that that's not that ideal we'll never completely get to. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, the other things about this business that might have made me nervous is, in a lot of businesses that my guests buy, like a services business, like a lawn care business, let's say a landscaping business or plumbing business, the business isn't necessarily so differentiated from hundreds of other plumbing businesses out there, but it's a local business. So that's kind of their competitive play, is that they only need to be competitive with 4 or 5 other big players in the market, and they can differentiate within that pool. But when you're selling on the internet, even putting Amazon aside, how do you differentiate from other parts sellers, parts distributors, parts e-commerce businesses? How does this not just become pure race to the bottom pricing bloodbath kind of dynamic?
Right. So I would say it's almost a similar dynamic to, if you had an HVAC business in a certain metro area, and now there are other players who are getting good at the internet and the sales process. I'm in a decently big enough market to grow, but it's also not like wildly huge. So there aren't that many players specifically doing what we're doing. And so I'm competing against a half a dozen other companies who have, even our direct competitors don't have the exact product mix that we do. We might have some overlap with like companies who sell like lawn care equipment. We might have some overlap with people who sell parts for small engines. But for like our end user, there aren't a ton of people who are companies who sell specifically for like, I would say sort of infrastructure builder contractors, right? So I'm sure we get ton of one-off customers who, or people who stop by and don't buy from us because we're not maybe the absolute lowest price on that one specific thing they're looking at that moment. When you've got a list of parts that you're trying to buy, and you want to buy 20 parts for one machine because you've got $100,000 piece of road you're trying to build, you're not like shopping around to save $2 here and there. You want to make sure that you're confident you're buying the right stuff, that machine is going to get back up and running, and your job's going to keep moving. So I think it still just comes down to
you differentiate on that service. That becomes really, getting them the parts, getting them exactly what they need, knowing that they're getting the correct parts, helping them figure out maybe, other parts they didn't realize they needed, and so on. That's really where the value is, and they'll pay for that.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. This reminds me a little bit of Danny Fields and Steve Reese's business, where they bought basically a distributor of the meters on the side of your house for gas, and a big part of their value prop is the technical sales service that they provide, helping home builders or whomever figure out exactly what they need.
Right.
It makes perfect sense once you kind of talk it out. But we're as consumers, we're so used to there not being a human in the mix. Everything, we just do our own research and we just buy our own stuff, and that's just been the steady march of consumer behavior forever.
Right.
It's interesting. It's interesting to just think, well, no, actually, I'd like some help on this sale, please. And that probably happens more in B2B land than we realize.
Yeah, for sure. And we're trying to make it as self-service as possible. But the way to do that is to see what people are calling us about. What are they chatting with us about? Where are they needing still the technical expertise or the guidance? And how do we then turn that into more self-service options very specifically to our type of customer? But the only way to know that is to hear from them anecdotally. Yeah.
But so it does serve a sort of data gathering purpose as well to have these conversations.
Correct.
Now, I've really jumped in onto the kind of strategic thoughts here. I want to hear more bullet points about the business, but one more question. So I imagine one of the big marketing strategies here would be to just have this incredible long tail of pages devoted to all these variations of machines and their attendant parts. Just hundreds and thousands of pages, product pages about random parts that you sell. Is that the play, sort of?
You got it. Yes. Yeah. Every time I go to add a tool to our website, it's a conversation around how do you manage huge catalogs, and how much is this going to cost me because of our massive product catalog. And so it's a combination of having them there so people can, sometimes we're one of a few people who even have a product that's on Google period, and they bump into us and then realize, oh, they got a ton of other stuff as well. But also it's a matter of like when they land on that one random product, showing them a few others for that same machine that they might need and didn't realize someone's, making it available to them on the internet in a self-service way if they want, or call us. But yeah, that's, it's managing a lot of SKUs.
Rewinding back a little bit now so just kind of bullet points about the business. You told us that it was at the lower end of your range of STE, which was $500,000 to $1.5 million. So let's call it $500,000 STE about.
Yeah. I don't think I really knew exactly. I mean, that's what they were representing, maybe even slightly more than that. But it was one of those where the inventory number over the years had been the same number. And the inventory was never tied to the accounting system, which is fine. It was easy enough to sort of back into and estimate. But yeah, that was roughly where it was.
And how about in revenue and number of employees?
Revenue was like about 3.5-ish million. And I think 7 employees at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So what is that? 1/7. So call that what? 15% margins. So for a business like this, that strikes me as probably pretty good margins in this category, I would guess, because it's not a lot of labor.
Yeah. Yes. Part of that was a very involved owner, as is common at that size range, obviously. I think and I ate up all of that immediately for the first couple years. But going forward, for projections, I use generally like a 12.5% to allow for a steady, 20 to 30% growth rate. But yeah, anything over 12.5%, I've always thought was pretty healthy for this type of business. I don't know. I guess I'm just basing that roughly on like what we did at the sprayer business, but not on anything else in particular.
But when you say 12.5% and anything above that to allow for growth, you said, does that mean that sort of like you allow yourself, once you're into the above 12.5, you can feel comfortable reinvesting that? If your margins get above that, you can feel comfortable reinvesting and putting fuel in the fire, putting the money back in.
I'm sure if I wanted to for a year at any point, as I know some people do, could make it 15 to high teens, and just know that the following year revenue will be exactly the same. But so some mix within there. But like I said, the first couple of years it was a zero-ish, but we've been growing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what did the purchase price look like, and how did you buy it?
It ended up being what I learned was a pretty vanilla kind of SBA deal. It was right around $2 million. It ended up being a little less than that purchase price, just based on a little bit of renegotiation. But call it $2 million-ish with 80% SBA loan, 10% seller note, 10% my equity check.
And that 4X was with inventory.
Correct. Yeah. So it was kind of your, in e-com businesses, sometimes it's the you'll see the multiple plus inventory for whatever reason. But so it was either like a 3X plus inventory or a 4X including inventory.
Well, let's hear about inventory and how. Two things I want to cover: the inventory and how you kind of diligenced it, and how you think about it now, because this is often one of the tricky parts with e-com, probably the trickiest part with e-com. And you've also got this interesting dynamic where you actually drop ship a lot of your parts directly from the manufacturer. And then I also want to talk about the technical knowledge needed to run this business. Your owner was pretty technical, a mechanic, you said. So first things first, inventory. So how did you diligence this inventory? This business is selling inventory. What does it look like to get in there and decide if it's really $500,000 worth of inventory?
Yeah. Looking at enough of this type of business, because even at the sprayer business, we had all along the way, even though we didn't make any acquisitions, we were looking at a lot of these types of businesses. And there's just always a certain percentage of, in parts businesses, whether it's e-commerce or not, of stale, rusty parts that you just know is kind of part of the deal. And, whether the seller and my seller at DHS couldn't have been better, was super upfront about everything. But
in other words, unsaleable, useless inventory.
Right. So you have some gray area there within that of like, these are parts for a machine that is a 20-year-old machine that they all had been in use until a few years ago. Yeah, it might sell because there's 300 of this machine still in use out there, but you're probably not going to. It's not worth the shelf space. It's tough. You kind of got to ballpark a decent amount of it. But if you can look at in parts businesses specifically, because that's all I know, so I won't speak to, I guess, other e-commerce. But generally, if you have any SKU that you've sold at least one of in, say, the last 12 to 18 months, I would treat that as active. And if you haven't sold it in at least one of it in 12 to 18 months, then that is stale and worthless and costs you more than, but just by taking up shelf space typically. And yeah, just looking for, I smile because you don't want to have, obviously, also if you say you've sold one of that item and you have 1,000 of them, well, we don't need 1,000 years worth of that particular item either. So just recognizing those discrepancies as well. So there's the sort of on off of like completely worthless or possibly worth something, but then also like the how many
we got
years
too
worth.
much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And do you feel that an inventory diligence is a key part of the diligence of a business like this? Or did you feel pretty comfortable doing kind of following whatever standard procedure to diligence inventory was fine? I guess the reason I'm harping on it is because the whole business is, like you say, is the inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like that's where there would be a lot more diligence necessary than elsewhere.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the business. So like if for instance, so say he had $500,000 in inventory, that's a few turns a year, based on the revenue size when I bought it. If it had been 3 or 4 times as much as a lot of parts businesses are, you'll see parts businesses with $3 to $5 million in revenue, and they also have $2 million in inventory. Well, you just know intuitively, like, there's an issue here. And then it's a matter of like, how much value is the seller putting on that inventory? And how much does it seem like this is when they're cashing out? And how much cash has the seller accumulated over the last several years? And if it hasn't been very much cash, but it's been a lot of inventory, I know these are more sort of more of a qualitative answer to your question, but to me, those were the kind of key things looking at a lot of these. And just the fact that this particular business, I trusted the seller when I would walk through an aisle and say, what is this? What's it used on? When was the last time you sold one of these? How dusty are bins?
Literally.
How rusty are some parts? Because a lot of time, things can accumulate rust pretty quickly and it's not a big deal. But if the whole bin is rusty and it's covered in cobwebs, I'm saying all these qualitative things because I guess you can only do so much with the data that you're provided with, and it's also not super easy to do like real comprehensive inventory counts in a lead up to a purchase, right? So I can't I can ask a seller to do a full inventory count before I buy it, but I can't necessarily be there asking a bunch of questions of the employees while they're doing that. You've had plenty of people, I'm sure, where, it's always a question of like, what employees are you able to talk to before the transaction goes through, if any, right? So, a lot of times you're relying then on reports that you're asking a seller to provide to you, but like, there's I'm not going to take that to what expert do I take that to say, tell me if this is accurate? I'm the expert. I mean, I'm not even an expert, but like, I'm closer to it than anyone else would be. Obviously, the real expert though is the seller. So if you don't trust the seller, and it's a lot of asking the same question 100 different ways about inventory and trends and why you have this in stock and not that.
Follow on to that, the technical nature of this business and him being a mechanic, this plays into the inventory because, again, this business basically carrying inventory and redistributing it is the business. So tell us how you thought about buying basically a technical sales business, not knowing then the first thing about this product category? How did you approach that?
Yeah. It was actually, looking back at my criteria, it was one of the things that was on my criteria as like a preference, was a technical sale. And I'm the least technical person myself. You know, my wife puts the furniture together. I can't do anything with my hands. But the experience then of having the parts business, the sprayer parts business, was telling, because like I was immediately selling parts for sprayers as a guy who didn't know what an O-ring was or the purpose. But to your point, it's just a matter of like how much technical intuition does that person on the phone with a customer need to have immediately, versus how good can we be as a company with having that information at the customer service person's fingertips. So if a customer can't find something on our website, and they're calling us, how quickly can we have those hard to find parts breakdowns pulled up on our computer screen? How quickly can we help a customer find a serial number on their very specific type of equipment, because that serial number has been muddy for 5 years and dirt's like caked into it, and we got to tell them where to find it, how to unearth it, so that we're finding the exact right parts breakdown for them. A lot of our customers aren't technically savvy at all. They can find our phone number, but they can't otherwise do much. So how do we get their nephew on the phone to print them a parts breakdown? You know, if it's something where we can't just hear exactly what it is, how do we get them there? So you're right. The seller was a mechanic, and was able to build a lot of this technical information onto our website, and we still use him regularly for a lot of information. But one thing that he wasn't on the phone with customers at all. He was able to hire people that he trained and had the right information in front of them. And yeah, I think that's the key thing, is just make it. We're hiring customer service people who have no experience in any of this, but they're good with people and they're capable of using tools that we're putting in front of them.
Then it sounds like the key kind of link in the chain was his ability to hire and train customer service people. Again, something that was going to rely on his technical knowledge as a mechanic, his intuitions. How are you planning, or how have you downloaded that capability into the organization without it there?
Yeah. So, I mean, luckily we did have a couple employees that had been there for a long time. And one in particular who's still there, who really knows the products inside and out and can answer a question from a customer without needing to look anything up. But it's really more about, I mean, even Dave, who's the seller, he's a mechanic. When it comes down to like, if a customer calls and says, "Oh, my exciter is rattling," and in this very specific sound is happening, like, yeah, sure, he's going to get to the bottom of that faster. But a lot of our customers are mechanics themselves, and it's not so much this is how you do the repair. It's how do we find this part that they already know they at least know they need that initial part, because they can see that it's worn. And then at that point, it's not so much like, oh, well, here's how you then install that part. It's a matter of, let's make sure that it's the exact right O-ring that even the seller couldn't eyeball. When you have, if you have a million different size O-rings, you can't look at it and know intuitively. But there really is just, it's unrealistic to think that anyone would help a customer as fast as someone who's worked on this equipment. But it is realistic to have like our customer service reps look up the part for our customer in a reasonable amount of time. Our customers realize if they call with an obscure part they're looking for, we're not going to magically have the part number on the top of our head. But if we say, all right, we're just looking for it, does it look like this? Maybe shoot them a quick picture and that is as good as you get. But having Dave and being able to use his initial technical knowledge and put a lot of that on our website. He made a lot of YouTube videos that people, reference still. And I'm still plan to have him hopefully make a lot more of those for us. But it's about having the technical knowledge available to us more than know it intuitively, because it's impossible.
Is there anything to learn about e-commerce generally? I guess since you're kind of B2B e-commerce, kind of depending how we choose to label you, do you have a sense of what buying a business like yours is versus, say, buying some consumer D2C e-commerce business? Does that feel like adjacent to your business, or does that actually feel like a completely different business model? And what might you tell people listening about whether or not to buy a business like yours or to buy kind of a consumer-y D2C business?
Yeah, it does feel different. Like when I've heard people on podcasts, or when I, try to listen to e-commerce podcasts, they're almost always D2C, and it does feel quite a bit different. I identify a lot more with parts businesses, like even ones that don't sell anything online, but say they're like a local parts supplier. So yeah, it's a little tough. I think the markets are quite a bit different. But that example you gave earlier of the meters, was that what the
gas meters?
And I did there were a lot of businesses I looked at that were selling parts and components to equipment that I had the thought of like, oh, I'll turn that into more of an e-commerce pack and ship situation. And I think there are a lot of opportunities from what I saw in those types of businesses, where it can be a little bit touchy in some of them, where they're if you're a parts dealer for certain manufacturers, they might have geographical restrictions on where or how you can sell. And if you start selling online out of state, other dealers may or may not have an issue. But I do think there are opportunities there. For sure, especially going forward as more and more people different types of consumers are being, everyone seems to be pretty comfortable buying stuff online now.
Online. Great, Matt. Well, I'd like to start wrapping, but let's hear how it's gone. So I have the sense, correct me if I'm wrong, that your thesis or your sense of the business from the outside looking in has played out pretty well. How's it gone?
Yeah. I think it's gone pretty much to plan. I mean, I've implemented a legit ERP system. We've made some upgrades to the website, implemented just a lot of your standard SaaS tools that are used by a lot of D2C e-commerce businesses, but we're using it in, obviously this more B2B experience. So trying to kind of marry those two, because a lot of those tools are very simple, for very simple transactions, and we're trying to use them in transactions that are a little bit more complex and often require a little bit more back and forth. So, it's not your standard customer service ticket a lot of times. But yeah, we're approaching 3 years in, and we'll be about double in revenue. The discretionary earnings should recover to not quite double from where I bought it, but should be somewhere close to that this year as well. But again, that was after a pretty big J curve trough after some expensive projects the first couple years.
Well, that's it. I would say that's pretty good progress and pretty exciting after 3 or so years to have doubled your STE, doubled your revenue and doubled your STE, and to have your initiatives kind of bear out, to spend a lot of money, but to have it go the way it should.
Yeah.
And so what is the plan thereafter? Or is the plan basically to kind of more of the same, or is there some grand strategy, or, how do you think about the next 5 years?
Yeah. So I hired an EOS implementer over the last 6 months, and I've got a little bit of a leadership team now, and, started to look at some of these types of questions over the next 5 to 10 years. And, I think we're at the point now where we finally have all the right platforms in place. And, I'm hoping we're at the point where we can legitimately start to scale, for our type of business anyway. And, I think we've got with so many SKUs, there are a lot of opportunities to get better at selling each one of those individual SKUs on our website. So that's either with very manual content that we're adding around those types of parts that customers are interacting with. But obviously there's all kinds of AI tools now that can help us. And I think marrying those two, like our actual product knowledge, our actual customer feedback data of all these customers that are shopping for these parts, we see what they're not clear on that they're asking us about. And then using the AI tools that are available to everyone, but not everyone has the same proprietary data input that we have. And that's been a big part of the investment the last couple of years, is investing in a real ERP that could start to collect this data that wasn't there before. I think those are the real opportunities, and a little bit of it is just staying that much ahead of any other competitors that might have similar ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, I'd love to grow organically at an aggressive, kind of that 25% plus a year, and I think that's doable organically. I mean, certainly if there are acquisitions that make sense along the way, I'll do it. It's a little bit different than obviously just buying another HVAC business within your metro area, in that I might just be buying either a website or a different dealer in a different area that might have different agreements with the same manufacturers. There are just a few different considerations, but the main plan is to grow it aggressively organically. And if we happen to bump into any decent acquisition candidates, we'll certainly take a look. But to stay in this main, parts for construction equipment, and just to our kind of our why that we sort of identified in the EOS process was to keep builders building.
Mm-hmm.
And I think certainly our first 10x is within this parts pack and ship world in North America. And maybe after that, if that becomes, I think our next, this is 8 or 10 years from now, but would be local service centers at that point. So we're not just providing the parts, but we're actually fixing the machines for you. There, for our specific equipment, I do think there are a lot of opportunities to provide better service than a lot of people are. And obviously at that point, that would be much more of a, maybe not obviously, but in my mind, much more of a acquisitive sort of growth strategy at that point.
But you said your first 10x, that would come post your first 10x, which I guess implies that you feel like you could, there's room here to 10x revenue, play your cards right, long enough time frame. So this, what was a $3.5 million business when you bought it, you could be selling you think there's room to sell $35 million in parts a year?
I do. I mean, that would include probably adding a couple of manufacturers lines that we're selling parts for, both, the OEM part and growing our aftermarket part, like replacement parts for those as well. But I mean, construction equipment in general is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are opportunities too if we want to start selling bigger parts for those bigger, legit heavy-duty machines, and having more warehouse space and shipping stuff on pallets instead of FedEx packs. Then there's room to grow within that as well. It's the same model. It's just a heavier shipment, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Great, Matt. And then last question. So the business is in Florida and you're in Southern California?
Correct.
And just any thoughts on virtual businesses? I guess, how often are you at the business, and do you like the nature of the business being one that you can run virtually?
Yeah. I mean, I just recently I'm there less. I mean, I've had an apartment there and was there a whole lot for the first couple years. So it was certainly not a virtual business for a while. And yeah, I certainly think obviously a business like this, where it's, leaning towards e-commerce, pack and ship, is for sure more of a virtual possibility. But we're we've got inventory, we've got people moving inventory. It's not just an FBA shipping stuff to Amazon scenario. But yeah, I would say this has been more closer to, being close to 3 years in now, where I've got an operations manager who is on site, and probably isn't wildly unlike if I had bought a local service business and you have operations managers who run the very physical day-to-day operation. At this point, we've hired contractors who are and employees who are remote and overseas, and we're probably half remote, half on site as far as employees go. So now it's not as crazy for me to rarely be on site, but right now I'm probably there every 6 weeks or so.
Oh, okay. And what is employee count at now?
Probably 11 or 12. 11. I'd say about 12.
Anything about your story or this business, DHS, Matt, that we didn't touch on that you feel like the audience should hear?
I think a common theme that a lot of your guests have, the ones that have done well, and even the ones that have struggled, I think the key thing to me is, like, you need to be someone who is able to walk into a room with any type of individual or group of people and just be able to communicate and listen to them. And I think as long as you're able to do that, though, this, specifically this SBA loan program is pretty wildly appealing. And it doesn't seem like there's any anti-SBA coalition out there that is jeopardizing this going forward. So yeah, I'm excited about it, and for just the sort of this part of the world in general going forward.
Well, Matt, and just about kind of net out how you feel about your business model, let's say a parts business or, a web-enabled parts business, it's not a business that I've interviewed any guests really. Well, I guess Steve and Danny a little bit, but it's not, a home services business. It's different than most of my typical guests. Is this an appealing business model? Is it something that guest searchers listening should maybe try to find?
I think so. Yeah, I think probably the highest likelihood that this one happened to be doing a decent amount of e-commerce sales, but more what I came across during my search was parts businesses who did a little bit of e-commerce or a little bit of pack and ship, where I thought I would turn it into more of a e-commerce operation, and that I think is where the opportunity probably is. You'd come across that more in a typical search now. I don't know. There's just a limited amount of this very specific type of business where they're selling parts for equipment online. So I'm sure you could come across. I'm sure people could run proprietary searches that might be close to that as well. But yeah, I think you more along the lines of like they're selling parts for. I like equipment specifically, but really any type of replacement parts, it would work, and you have access to the parts to buy them at a competitive price and have some margin there. But maybe where they've at least proven a little bit that they can pack and ship those parts and not have their vendors cut it off, then that would probably be enough of a proof of concept that you'd be able to grow it for sure.
And so a parts business like that today would be serving its local market sort of, and be taking orders at the other end of a phone call, of a phone number.
Yeah. I think a lot of times
there are a lot of businesses like that. There's a lot of kind of parts businesses and all over, kind of local businesses all over the place sort of thing, serving their local geography. It's funny. You say a parts business, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a business type. But I actually, as I said, I haven't really interviewed anyone who's kind of done a parts business, and I don't know what they look like or how common they are or what. So carry on.
Obviously people think of automotive parts whenever you think of parts, and that's not what I'm talking about. But you see any piece of equipment anywhere, whether it's mobile or not. And you've had plenty of guests, I'm sure, that service different types of equipment, and that's the business model. I looked at a bunch of those as well that do have a parts component that I thought I could grow. But yeah, a lot of those are it's a mechanic type owner where they want to be able to service that customer afterwards if there's any issue with a part or component. And that's much easier for a mechanic type person if they can see it, see the issue physically and put their hands on it. And yeah, it's just a matter of being comfortable with solving those customers' issues when there are issues without having the part right in front of you. You might have to ship it back to you, to your warehouse. But yeah, there are absolutely a ton of those businesses out there for any type of, it might not be quite as technical as what we're selling, but it can be technical enough to where it's not, Amazon can't get it right. You can't tell by looking at a picture of a wheel on an obscure machine whether it's exactly the right size. You can if they've taken the picture properly with some scales on it, but generally you're going to need something more than Amazon, at least right now, is providing.
If people want to learn more about parts businesses, Matt, or they got one that they're looking at, how can they contact you? How do you prefer they do that?
LinkedIn is great.
All right. Matt Drndak, thank you for walking us through web-enabled technical parts business. Congratulations on what seems like a really good business with a lot of growth still ahead of it.
For sure. Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week. So tons of new interviews and stories to come, stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.